What's up there, everybody? It's Carpo here, coming at you from my messy back room, my thinking room. And I wanted to share just an idea I had a minute ago. I was looking on, I guess I wasn't online, I was just sitting there on the couch and I was reading a book and I was thinking about friends and how we think that friends change over time. I would say, oh yeah, I was good friends with so-and-so, and then once we got older we kind of parted ways. And I started thinking for a minute about just a couple people that I recently reacquainted with after years of not speaking. Should I say I acquainted with them over the past few years after decades of not speaking. And not that we didn't speak because we didn't like each other, but we just hadn't seen each other, you know. People I used to skate with. I was a skater. And I was also into, I was into heavy metal, and I was a skater, and then I went through this hippie phase, and I went through all these different phases and met so many different people during those phases. And I was thinking about one of my buddies who I grew up with. We really spent a lot of time together as a youth, but when you really think about it, even though you spend a lot of time with a person as a kid, as you grow up, you tend to grow into yourselves, and then you have different interests. For example, one of my friends is like super into like soccer and sports, and I just have no interest in college sports at all. It's just not my interest. I mean, complete sports fan, but nothing related to anything that we used to do together. But when I thought about that further, I started thinking, okay, he was always kind of like that. And I started thinking about other friends that I grew up with that maybe I parted ways with, and saying, well, it's not that people change. It's that when we're young, we're more willing to accept the differences in one another. But more than that, we don't see those differences yet. We're ignorant of a lot of differences. For example, if you grew up with anyone, if you were a non-religious person, let's say, and you had friends whose families were extremely religious, then you might know what I mean. I had a Mormon friend and a few Christian friends, and I was always the bad guy. And a Jewish friend. And according to those parents, it seems like me, along with all my other friends, are always the bad guys. And it turns out a lot of these kids who grew up with the religious influence ended up doing some pretty, getting themselves into a lot of trouble, let's just say. Whereas I tended to be not so bad of a role model after all. In other words, the values that I learned, even though I was a punk-ass kid, and they seemed like they were good kids, they were always causing trouble the whole time. It's not that they changed because of their religion, and it's not like the people who grew up and are suddenly... the difference is that you're willing to look past it. Like, they may have not been that into that religion, or you could look past it as friends, whereas parents couldn't. You know what I mean? The grown-ups couldn't see past it, so if they weren't within their religion, it was a totally, null friendship. And you don't see that as a kid. But then when you get older, you find out that your friends, whether they take that religion or not, you may not be able to reconcile those differences, because that becomes more important as an adult than it is as a kid. I mean, not many kids are obsessed with religion unless their parents force it upon them. There's not a lot of kids who are going out there obsessing about what God is. They all ask questions, of course, but those are just a couple of examples. Sports and religion and political views are maybe another one. You may think, well, this person went off on a totally different direction than he used to be. But when you really look at it, you think people really are, in a lot of ways, who they're going to be from a young age. We can change, and we can change components about ourselves. But as to where we're going, that's a tough one. And I'm not saying that's 100%, because there are people out there who go from being, say, full-blown atheist to religious overnight. Many different reasons why a person may not be into sports and then become obsessed with sports. Or whether a person isn't into the same political views as you, but then they change sides. And I'm just using these as a few examples because they're, big things to people. Religion, politics, and sports. How funny I chose those three. It's, to the average American, or I should say the average person, I guess, anywhere in the world. I can only relate because I live in the U.S., but sports is a very important thing to people, and it is almost religious. And that's, it has major, huge followings behind the people. People study it and research it. It has all the makings of a religious type influence, and I think that as humans we yearn for that. To me, I just I have no interest in sports whatsoever. I like playing games with people, and I don't mind playing a game now and again. And it doesn't have to be super exciting, and it doesn't have to be violent. I'll play a game of softball or baseball. It's fun, but I'll have no way in hell you'd catch me watching a baseball game. And I've tried, but but that's a major thing for people, because everybody gets together on Sunday and go out and watch the game. I'm like, you know, Super Bowl Sunday to me is time to go out go out and find something to do. Maybe go out to eat or something. I would say it's a good day to go on a drive. I used to think that, but then I realized how many people were driving on the road drunk from Super Bowl Sunday, so not always the best idea. Anyhow, just some thoughts about how we change as we get older, but we really don't, you know? And I think if we look back at our friends, we'll say they've always kind of been that way, that maybe we were just too dumb to pick up on it. I don't mean dumb in a negative way, just ignorant. Ignorant's not a bad word either. It's just ignoring the facts, and often it's not our own fault. We're just ignorant of it. Ignorant of being ignorant. But I can get past a lot of differences in my friends, and, you know, we have totally similar views on a lot of things. I've learned to really yearn for the commonalities between my friends and I, or anyone for that matter. Friends, family. I mean, you know, anybody out there who has kids, you know, understands your kids might not be into the same thing as you are, or they may be, but you may have totally different views on things. Unfortunately, my oldest son, who's turning 22 this year, he's very similar to me in the way that he thinks and processes. But I almost think that that's like a fault in a way, because the deep thinkers tend to get kind of pushed out and marginalized by people who don't want to give life critical thought. And so to each his own. And that's the thing, is I think that ultimately whoever you become and whatever you become and however you change, the most important and critical aspect of it is having integrity, which means being integrated into the world. It's very important to remember integrity doesn't mean you wear a suit and you have a job and money. That has nothing to do with integrity whatsoever. It also doesn't mean what type of mannerisms you have in specifically. Integrity is just how well do you assimilate into the world that you're a part of. And you can resist it and fight it and say, well, I'm not going to be like those sheeple. It's not going to make a difference. You're going to always suffer if you separate yourself from your fellow man. And if not, then so be it. You know, good for you. If you're able to think that everybody else is wrong and you're right and your life is great, then so be it. But for me, I think integrity really means you are able to walk into a room with any type of person and strike up a conversation. You know, actually, just about 15 minutes ago, a guy came to the door and he was asking questions, a political questionnaire, and I didn't know who he was representing or whatnot. But my instant judgment was, okay, here we go. Like, I just wanted to shut the door on him, you know. But I answered his questions. He asked me, well, how do you feel about Hillary Clinton? Unfavorably or favorably? And I was like, very unfavorably. And I went on, and he was kind of prying, and I think it turns out he gave me a couple pamphlets, and they were for Republican representatives, but he kept asking me, will you vote Republican or Democrat for the local blah, blah, blah. I said, I don't know. I have to weigh the issues and look at the people, the candidates. And he just gave me this dumbfounded look. Like most people, as if, well, you have to pick a side. And I said, he didn't say that, but I said, if anything, I like to consider myself an independent. And he's like, oh, okay, fair enough, there's an option for that, and he marked it. And then when I cracked a little joke about his burning an option, you know, just to see what he'd say, he just kind of blew it off. And then he gave me the Republican things, and I thought, that guy really kind of looked like a right-winger. But I was post-judging him, okay? And he could have easily been a Democrat, too. And I have strong opinions against both sides, and I understand both sides, too. It's not that I'm one or the other. And I bring this up because as you get older, you seem to have to pick a side. You pick a sports team, you pick a religion, you pick a political view, you pick a job, and you shut your fucking mouth and do what you're supposed to do. And that's what society wants us to do. And I find it to be appalling. Appalling. I mean, it's easy for people to ignore their short period here as a human, because if you're wrapped up in, say, believing that there's an afterlife, then it's easy to ignore this life and think, well, I'll do better later. Or if you believe in reincarnation, to think, well, in another life. And I've heard people say that and use those excuses. Well, if I can't reconcile this, then I'll do it in the next life. And I say, bullshit. You know, you have to do it now. I mean, any type of problems you have to work out now, or you'll suffer now. And it's a crucial component of life, is that you don't have to pick a side. You don't have to have extreme beliefs to be happy. Reading an article this morning actually about ghosts and the lack of evidence, because I was kind of curious lately, because I was talking about Bigfoot with someone, and I said, you know, up until recently, I always believed that there may have been a true Bigfoot, and that maybe it's just not here anymore. I know I've read tons about it in decades past, how it could be the giant ground sloth and all this, but point being that today, considering all the UFO footage and pictures, all of the Bigfoot footage and pictures, and all the ghost stories and pictures that they've had from 4 decades ago or longer, today, where every single person on Earth has a camera, basically, there's 6 billion cell phones, I think, it's ludicrous that we're not catching these things. And that whenever we get some picture of anything, it's some grainy photo, and then they end up getting these ghost hunter shows where they go on and they hear a door close or creak. And so I've read several scientific articles as well as mystical articles, or ghost supported and ghost opposed, just to not try to figure it out, but rather just to see what both sides have to offer. Just like I do with politics. And I found that it's almost sad to think that you know, that modern scientific method is casting a shadow of doubt on many of the things that people really want to believe. And I'm bringing this up because I think a lot of folks think you have to believe in something great and mystical and super that you can prove in order to live a happy life. In other words, I just know ghosts exist, or I just know Bigfoot exists, or Pleiadians. And I kind of, I'm at this point a little dismayed and a little bummed out that I don't believe in any of the psychics, any of the channelers, any of these new age techniques, other than being a possible energy source we don't understand. In other words, the people who think they understand their gift, I don't necessarily believe that they have a gift. If you, an example would be psychics. They very well could be speaking from their metaphoric mind. Maybe they are pulling it from the ether. I don't know. But when it comes to things like ghosts, I always ask these questions of, you know, why would somebody move on and then come back in a ghost human form, you know? Why would they come back just when they're called upon? And they have all these stories about how, oh, it's hard for them to break through the veil, and they're interdimensional, and that they have to go through these layers in order to come back, and it takes a lot of energy. And I just say, how do you know all this stuff, you know? Well, they've just told me, you know? And knowing the tendency for the mind to hallucinate and to create a reality, I'm just as fascinated with saying, well, maybe something is true, maybe it isn't, as I am with having a definite answer. And so it's not to take a shit on anybody's like mystical beliefs, because if you look back, even 3 years ago, I was saying all kinds of things that I believed were true, that I just know, you know, that there's certain things, and the only ones that I really hold on to, and the ones that I've been solid about, other than being wishy-washy because I'm not sure what I believe, is that there is an well, not an omnipotent, I guess you could call it that, rather an overlying force, what you might call the grand architect, but it's not a designer, it's not a god, it's the whole of everything as a creation that's creating itself. And I don't know how that works. To try to define it is ludicrous, but there are certain faiths that are worth having. And it doesn't mean you have to think you're important, though. But you can if you choose, if that makes you feel more comfortable. Each person has their own idea of what it is to be important. For some people it's just serving others. For some people it's having a lot of money. I mean, you know, people think having money and fame makes you special. It's sad. In this society we have people like Donald Trump running for president, and people like him because he's a belligerent rich asshole. That to me shows that other people want that for themselves, and think that that is a good way to be a person like that. And it just shake my head in disgust, because it's like so shameful that people believe that that's okay to be that way and to talk to people that way. And then on the other side we have, like, you know, the opposite choices. Obviously Hillary, which I'm not even going to go into that nonsense. She's just as bad, and I won't even go into it, but this isn't political. So I think it's, you know, it's not about picking a side always. And it's interesting when we have friends in our lives that do pick sides, it's easy for them to tell us we should too. But anyway, I'm being summoned, so I gotta